Starting a derivatives business at AIG was one of the very few money money making ideas that had not sprung fully formed from Hank Greenberg's fertile mind. This also explains why he didn't control it at the start. Although has an insurance company, AIG was Interright's business. It did not necessarily follow that insurance companies were diving into derivatives. Insurance companies were generally conservative institutions. If they used derivatives at all, it was as a customer of a big bank like JP Morgan, trying to hedge an interest rate or a currency risk. Under Greenberg, AIG and built a reputation for its willingness to take one unusual one of a kid risk. AIG wrote kidnappings insurance. It insured satellites. It even wrote insurance of the first ostrich farm in Texas. Remaker used it to boast that AIG's balance sheet was so big that it could take on risk other companies couldn't. But derivatives, Greenberger had really thought of it as a potential new line of business. It was Sosin who brought the idea to Greenberger. Sosin was the prototypical modern was Streeter, a native of Salt Lake City. He had gotten a PhD from Stanford, taught finance at Columbia Business School, and but in a stint at Bell Laboratories before joining Drexel Burnham Lambert in the early 1908. He was, in other words, a quant. Drexel in those days was best known for its most infamous executive, Michael Milligan, the man who popularized junk boats and built a huge business around them. Sosin wasn't interested in junk boats. Instead, like any good quant, he gravitated toward complex derivatives, become one of the pioneers in developing ever more complicated forms of swaps. The problem for Sosin was that at Drexel, derivatives were never going to replace junk bonds as the film's bread and butter. Drexel also didn't have a particularly good credit rating, which meant its borrowing costs were higher than its competitors. This made it difficult to run a profitable derivatives desk. Sussing had big ideas about doing swap deals that no one had ever done before, with duration of 15 of 20 or even 30 years instead of the much shorter durations that were then the norm. He needed to find a different corporate parent to make that happen. By the fall of 1986, Sosin and several Drexel colleagues were searching for a company that could back them. They were particularly interested in companies with lots of lives and capital and a AAA credit rating. Then, as now, there were fewer than a dozen companies with AAA ratings. Warren Buffett's conglomerates, Berkshire Hathaway and General Electric both had AAA ratings, so did AIG, a fact in which Remacher took immense pride and which he jealously guarded. Susan was introduced to Remacher through former Connecticut Senator Abraham Rybakov and Greenberg were old friends. Greenberg was clearly enamored with Susan, but because this was a realm outside his area of expertise, he took a backseat in the negotiation that ensued. Matthews was his point made in the length with Susan. What Susan wanted has complete autonomy and, of course, coming from Wall Street, a piece of whatever profits he generates for AIG, and that's what he got the contract he signed with AIG in January 1987, called for the formation of a joint venture with AIG, owing 80% and Susan 20%. Susan and his team got to command 38% of FP's profits, which were designated incentive compensation. Susan in turn will have sole discretion in distributing his share of the PA to his staff. In truth, part of the reason Grevenger was willing to cut such a sweet deal was that he didn't really comprehend just how profitable FP was going to be. Besides, as someone who was there would later recall, Hank liked getting married and never thought about getting divorced. Almost immediately, the new joint venture was taking on legal risk than most other swap dealers. Without question, the key to the business was the triple A rating and the enormous balance sheet of the parent company, which not only gave FP cost advantage, but made it a very desirable counterparty. Nobody worried that AIG would have problems if it lost money in derivatives trade. It was also extremely well run. Susan kept close tabs of FP's risk profile, which in turn allowed him to take longer risks and generate longer profits. FP built a special computer system that could track the ever-changing value of its swap deals far more closely than anybody else in the business. For instance, under Susan, FP didn't indeed specialize in swaps that went out as far as 30 years, controlling the risks by using technical called dynamic hedging which involved constantly recalibrating and ranging its positions. The hanging challenge are extraordinary at 30 years. One competitor told he Wall Street Journal in 1993, "We haven't done them there to risk, but FP's willingness to do long-dated deals also allowed it to change bigger faves than in competition. In its first 6 months, FP generated 60 million. Greenberger was amazed. There are another things people remembering about the early years at FP. One was that as controlling as Susan was, the environment he created was far more collaborative than other AIG business. Greenberger liked people to say how how height when he said jump. Susan wanted people who were willing to question deals, and he created a culture where people could express skepticism without fear of being reprimanded. Succinct also instilled in his troops a sensitive will and elite vanguard, battling bigger and more powerful forces. To some degree, they were, despite AIG's strong balance sheet and AAA rating. FP was much smaller than other players with big derivatives desk, lacking the built-in client base of a Goldman or a JP Morgan. So it had to be more creative. Markers at FP will come up with some exotic new product, selling to clients, and then right it has hard come up with some exotic new product, sell it to clients, and then right it has hard has taken for 2 or 3 years. Eventually thought the big boys at Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan's would come out with their own version of the FP product, at which point the profit margins will be squeezed and FP would move on to something even more exotic. So things propensity for pushing the edge of the derivative enveloped caused the Wall Street Journal to label him the Dr. Strangelove of derivatives. The other thing that traders noticed was that Hank Grebenher was simply not part of their lives elsewhere in the company. Grebenher had no computation about killing a middle manager in some division somewhere to find an answer to a question he had that never happened at FP. The special computer system Susan had built for was not shared with the rest of AIG. On the contrary, he had a clause in his contract stipulating that if he ever left the company, he could take the whole system with him. Anytime Grebenher did anything that Sussing considered meddling, he would erupt in 1990. For instance, Drexel imploded and Greenbacher quickly snatched up a handful of Drexel traders, with the idea of having them created a new currency trading operation for AIG. When he told Sosin what he had done, Sosin replied that under the terms of their joint venture, only FP could engage in currency trading for AIG. He refused to allow it. Greenbacher responded by sending Sosin a letter informing him that AIG planned to terminate its joint venture agreement. Sosin reacted by undertaking a search for another AAA company to back him, knowing that he had the contractual rights to take his computer system with him. When Greenbacher heard through the grapevine that Sosin was doing, he blinked. Within 2 months, he had patches with things up with Sosin and brought him back into the fold. Thought he did get Sosin and lower the initiative compensation pool from AIG. Chairman Greenbacher announced renewed agreement with Howard Sosin on AIG financial products. Read the handling of the press release announcing the ideal making it sound as if Sosin had simply reopened. No one had any idea Sosin had almost walked out the door. Why was Greenbacher so worried about Sosin leaving AIG? Money, of course. In 1991, for just 4 years after it had happened for business, FP generated in profits according to Business Week and was the fastest growing part of AIG. The article also claimed that Sosin was taking home between 3 million and 5 million, an amount that was almost certainly too low in a legal bright fee left in 1995 by Randall Roxon, who served for many years as Sosin's right-hand man before falling out with him. Braxton reported that FP cumulated profits between 1988 and 1992 were in excess of 1 billion. To journalists and stock analysts, AIG had always been something of a box quarter after quarter. Its earnings went in only one direction, up, no matter what calamities had taken place around the globe: hurricanes, floods, earthquakes, bad lawsuits, all the bad things that insurers wrote. Insurance against crushed their profits when the disasters finally struck. Except at AIG, people who followed AIG often chalked this up to the business genius of Hank Gremacher, who seemed to be able to wheel the company into the kind of double-digit earnings that investors craved. I thought of him as a great size one farming analyst, but I didn't quite get how he did it. The author of that Business Week article thought, but for another explanation, AIG diversified unit protect it from having to take the big earnings hits that other insurers regularly suffered. The magazine singled out AIG's various financial service divisions, which it said were generating some 25% of AIG profits.